So this meeting is being recorded. So whenever you hear that word, it basically means no F words, only the host. So me, Mark, and Colin can swear from now on till the recording gets stopped. But welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is really, really cool because I've known Colin for a little while and then got introduced to Mark through some friends. And I was at Angel Spirits Awards, and I don't know if it was just the stars aligning, but I ended up sitting right next to Mark for the whole dinner, which was really cool. And we were just like little kids, just talk. So welcome, Colin and Mark. Thanks for giving up your time for us.
Thanks for having us, Ash.
Yeah. So I think
your faces and names there as well. Hello.
Yeah. So what we'll do is I kind of say to Mark and Colin, it's this not nice, just to sit there and listen to stories. So let's maybe just quickly talk about the New Make spirit, and then we're obviously eager to hear some stories from Mark. So Colin, do you want to talk to the New Make spirit?
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. So if you haven't already, put that into your glasses, please.
Yeah. So
and then we'll hear some stories from Mark here.
So I'm assuming everyone knows what New Make spirit is. Just in case you don't, it's unaged spirit. So it's Waiheke whiskey straight off the still before we can call it whiskey. So of course in New Zealand has to be minimum of 2 years in wood before we can call it whiskey. So it's New Make, or in Scotland would be called Clearach, some places called White Dog. So that's why it's white. So no wood influence on that. We thought it'd be good just to include this to give it kind of an idea of what the distillery character is. It's something you don't often get a chance to try unless you go on distillery tours. We're never going to sell this in full-size bottles or even in 500ml bottles. So the only way really to try this is with the tasting pack or when you come visit the distillery. I'm sure we'll let you try it there as well. So we've brought it down to 45%, just to make it a little bit easier to drink. It comes off the still at, Mark, you'll need to help me with numbers.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it comes off the still at a bit of a range, but our final tank prior to a little bit of a cut, so around about 68%, and then that's cut down to 63.5 for barreling. So it changes a little bit if we're doing a peated or a non-peated run. And we're a peated whiskey distillery, New Zealand peated whiskey distillery, really trying to get that peat, and so we end up pushing the tails out a little bit further and further to try and, because we'll talk about New Zealand. Let's just taste it first and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah. So I think everyone's going to get their own characteristics on the nose, but you might have read our tasting map. We put on there cereal, blueberries, currants, earthiness, fresh kindling. Certainly on New Make spirit you'll often get cereal notes or fruity notes as well. So I think the fruit on this one is kind of blueberries, currants. On the palate.
I'm just happy to go on the record. If you want to bottle it, I will buy some bottles. Yeah. I think it's absolutely. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. I've tried some really young Isla whiskeys, which are not very different to this, to be honest. Just got barely 3 years into a barrel, but yeah.
And I think it's quite a dangerous thing, New Make spirit, because once you start tasting it and you get over the fact that okay, there's no wood influence in there, there's no maybe vanillas and toffee and things like that you get from the wood.
Yeah,
but it's really drinkable. like I enjoy that. So palate, maybe cereals. The one interesting note that we get, I think, throughout all Waiheke whiskies is this touch of salinity. So quite similar, I guess, to a lot of Isla whiskies as well, and one of those things that's kind of hard to explain where it comes from. Probably from the fact that we're on an island, so it's got that sea air just running through the whole distillery. So could be that, could be coming in somewhere else, but you definitely get this seawater, sea spray thing on it. Finish is quite slow burning. We've put a little bit of romantic language, but heartwarming peat. So just to kind of warm the cockles of your heart.
Yeah. Could you, I'm assuming you read the bottle pack from us or directly from Waiheke. Could you just quickly talk us through, Colin, because it'll help us a little. You've got obviously the logo here, and then there's a bit of chart here. Could you quickly talk everyone through it, what it represents? So hypothetically says DY 582 or 502 distillers.
Yeah, so I'll let Mark go into all those detail bits and
Okay.
the sort of top part of each one. But just to actually explain how we'll go through the tasting tonight. So we're going to do, of course, the New Make Spirit first, and then we're going to go to Moss, and then to Seris 1, and finish with Bog Monster. So the numbers, you might see it says like WW release 01 on Moss. And so that's because that's going to be the first release in a full-size bottle. We'll speak a bit more about that later, but that'll be release number 1 in full-size 700ml bottles. And then release number 2 is Seris 1. So it's called Seris 1, it's release number 2. And then Bog Monster is, I've not actually got the sheet in front of me, but is it release 5? Yeah, 5. So we're going to have a couple of non-peateds in between. We'll talk a bit more about that, and we'll do another tasting for that one. But Mark, do you want to tell us about all the barrel sequence? Well, barrel sequence is obvious, but all the yeast and wort and wash stuff.
Well, I'll just tell you, just before we start, I'll just tell you about why we're doing this. And the idea behind this is to get as much of the liquid in front of you guys as possible, and to present essentially what we've been up to for the last 12 years, without you having to go and buy 700ml bottles. And we're not, and just before you freak out, we're definitely not the same sort of prices that you traditionally have come to know for New Zealand whiskey. So Moss is $130 for 700ml at 44%. So it's not but the idea really is just to give you a bit of an idea. So each tasting pack has the 2 releases that are coming up. It has the New Make, and it has one of our SC special circumstances, which are single cask releases. In this case, it's Bog Monster. The next one's called Dog Years. It's our non-peated range that will have Cantankerous in it, which is a single cask release, as well as our Dyad Chardonnay and our Sweetwater. And so, and then the third pack will be Special Circumstances, which will be a single cask pack this year. And the final pack will be our Christmas release. So we've got 4 packs coming out this year. And the idea is hopefully there's something for everybody in those packs. And they build a little portfolio. And each year we're going to just release some packs, and they'll hang around. We have sold out the packs, but we'll make some more because they went in 2 weeks. So we kind of weren't quite expecting that. But so that's the idea behind this whole thing. And we struggled a lot with age statement. I mean, we do have some of the oldest New Zealand whiskey around. I mean, but still, I think we're probably better off letting people find out, the age of the whiskey by instead of writing 5 on the front in big letters and people just not buying it. That if you look on the whiskey, it'll tell you when it was distilled and when it was bottled, so you can work out the age. But we just don't use that age statement because as you may know, our Angel share is up to 15% by the time you looked at alcohol dilution and actual liquid evaporation. It's crazy the speed, as you'll see some of these whiskies are aging at. So we're finding that the idea of age statement for us isn't relevant. Yes, all these whiskies are a minimum of 5 years old, but and we're never releasing anything under the 5-year range, but we think we've got something to say at 5 years, and that's the idea. For more transparency, every bottle's released with the yeast. When we first started off, we couldn't really get great yeast. So we were using Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is a yeast more commonly found in the vineyard, because I don't know if most of you know, we share Mudbrick Vineyards winemaking facility to make our whiskey while we're busy building this new distillery that comes online this Christmas. So we've been working with at the Mudbrick facility all this time, and so there's lots of stuff lying around. Interesting stuff to make whiskey from, yeasts and all sorts of stuff. So until recently, when we got a really good source of Anchor Distillers yeast, a lot of this stuff, 10, 12 years ago, no one was distilling anything in New Zealand, and we just had to use what we had. So hence why some of our older stuff, these ones have all got Saccharomyces cerevisiae as the yeast. As running down the list, then we talk about a specific gravity of the wort, the ABV of the wash, and they all vary slightly depending on it's the wash is made outside. There's a lot of natural yeasts coming in there. So at the moment, the ABV varies a little bit, also with the fermentation. And then the spirit on and off is where we take our heads and tails cuts. And that tells you a lot about, how we're pushing those tails out. So if you look at, say, Bog Monster, for example, we're pushing the tails out to 55% to try and get that peat. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that New Zealand peat. But so that's what they're all, that's what they are on each list. So as we go through, back to Colin, but that's how we made this Peated New Make, which is our brand new stuff. This is the direction we're heading in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, like I say, it's great. It's great just to be able to try New Make Spirit just for that distillery character. Like I say, I think once you start drinking it, it's very, very tempting to drink as on its own, or maybe even a highball that you could have it with soda water and ice. But just now, anyway, it's not in the plans to be releasing this as a commercial product. What do you think of it, Ash? What do you get on your?
It's most of the New Make Spirit I've tried has been at just at that high ABV. That's why I say I'm quite happy to at 45%. I can sip it easily. It's there's no acidity as salt. Like the last one we tried was an Aaron one. No, sorry, not Aaron Lag, which was an interesting experience. It was a lot more fruitier, whereas this one, you sort of they get that coastal character is lingering there, but it's not overpowering in any way in terms of the smoke, which I guess carries on in the whiskies as well. The smoke is never overpowering. Is there just to complement the journey.
I think it's more like I get more like an earthiness on it as opposed to smoke. Like it's the kind of the thing that carries through some of the other whiskies as well as this kind of mushroomy character, but a bit funky, a bit dusty. I think that's quite a pleasing note.
And it's probably a good time to talk to you about New Zealand peat really briefly while we're sipping this, because a lot of what we're talking about on our website, there's a blog, a news section where I write about pretty much everything we're talking about. There's a big section there on New Zealand peat. So most of you will be familiar with swamp kauri. Most of our podocarp forest doesn't break down. So, they in the bogs, the swamp bogs, we can go and dig up swamp kauri. It's 1,500 years, 2,000 years old, or whatever it is. So our peat is very lignin poor, which means it's not a great fuel source, which is why it was never really used much here as a fuel source. So it predominantly is a lot of stuff like eucalypts and tea tree, flaxes, rush, depending on what part of the country. I mean, there's large peat bearing areas. We have the Northland Peat Dome. We've got the Waikato, the Hauraki Plains, heading down then into. This is from Invercargill. So this is a peat bog from the bottom of the South Island. It's predominantly rush, flax, tea tree. So you get those resinous, oily notes without a lot of smoke. And a lot of you will be trying to find that smack in the face, front up Isla style peat, even though we're at 40 ppm. So this is the same as a Port Charlotte peated malt, but you just won't get it because there's no lignin in there. And even if we push the tails right out, like in Bog Monster, you're still getting this umami, mushroomy type tastes, but you're not getting that full-on frontal lignin-based smoke, which is cool because that's what New Zealand peat is. We don't want to make a facsimile of Scottish whiskey. Somebody's already doing that really well in Scotland, so we want to make something that's a New Zealand product that is different. That's why you want to drink it, right?
Yeah, 100%. Mark, do you want to maybe just take a couple of minutes, give us, like obviously some of us know you well now, but like from my perspective, working in Huntly, there were great rumors of whiskey being made on Waiheke for a long time. But for those of us who were not in the industry for a long time, none of us had a clue, what is this mysterious hole where these people gather and they make spirit? Do you want to give us just a journey or quick?
I mean, I'm a doc. So my job, I'm an oncologist, and most of my life's been spent telling people bad news and then cutting big cancers out of people. I'm a serious whiskey geek from way back when, and we started distilling in 2008. just as a hobby. And I've got an acreage on Waiheke where I live, and we have bees and honeybees, and we make honey. And we actually started off making a honey rum. That was the very first thing we made. And it, we used to take it to parties and all those kind of things. And it was very successful on a local level. No one went blind anyway, so it was pretty good. And then we turned into, well, let's make whiskey, because I love whiskey. And it's one of those things that we didn't really think was possible. And just because most alcohol, as small levels distillers, it's usually a sugar wash. So trying to make so it actually started, our whiskey journey started with an old keg of off beer, essentially, that we distilled. Because it's a pretty, instead of going through the whole mashing process, we can just get some beer, buy some beer, or get a keg that's old and 50 liters in there, whack it in the still, distill it, and then you can make, and so it went, and putting them in small barrels and messing around with that kind of thing. And then we decided I've got a mate who's he's an engineer from San Francisco, who is a really clever guy, a maker, a guy called Eric Gullickson, and he's a CAD designer. And we decided to build our own stills, because no one in New Zealand was building stills. We built our first still, which was we used for both wash and spirit, 900 liters. And then we started making some interesting whiskies, and from there we thought, well, let's go the whole hog. We built our own mash tun. We built a wash still, and a couple of 1,000 liters wash still, and the rest is history. And we started really seriously making high volume whiskey in 2010, and reusing all in mud brick, reusing all the old wine barrels, reshaving, retoasting them ourselves for stock, and playing around in those days with non-peated whiskey, because there was no New Zealand peat, and we weren't really interested in importing barley to New Zealand. So it's kind of how we started, really. And it was just really a hobby, a constant pursuit to make very nerdy, very geeky whiskey at a high level, but never really thinking that it would turn out to do what we've done here. There's a question here. Someone says some of the whiskies presenting 42 to 40%. Are they naturally presented in terms of color filtration? Yes. We don't chill filter. We don't add color to anything at all. Okay. So these have been through a rough pad filter from the winery. It's about 10 microns. And that's really to get rid of barrel char and odds and sods, non-chill filtered and no color. So you may notice a bit of clouding, certainly if you're putting ice or water with them, if you're dropping them down to around about 20%. We do a lot of our nosing and tasting at around about 20%. So when we're doing a big run of these to try and suss out how we're going to present them, then we drop them right down. They go cloudy. But that's just an education thing, I think,
Very nice. Colin, should we get everyone to start sipping the moss?
Yeah, so if you've got moss in your glass now, and as I mentioned before, then this is going to be the first one that's coming out in 700ml bottles. We've intentionally led with New Zealand peat because Waiheke Whisky is a distillery that focuses on peated whiskies. As Mark mentioned, started off doing non-peated, but then very soon, as we could get our hands on peated malt, the peat obsession began. I remember when I first got on board with Waiheke Whisky end of last year, and Mark was telling me about all the whiskies, running through them all, and I think it was the Bog Monster that he was talking about at the time, and he said, it just smells like burning hospitals, just bandages and hospital going up in flames. And I thought, wow, I wonder what your colleagues would say about that, Mark, in the hospital. But it's just a real, just that hospital corridor characteristic, which I think is mostly in Bog Monster, so that's the one we're saving until last. But the moss then, on the nose, the first thing that leapt out at me today when I nosed it, it's different each time, but I'm really getting that licorice note today. So kind of licorice. We've got on the tasting notes jasmine, floral, honey. But really the licorice, I think, is the one for me that's coming through most. A little bit of hard toffee as well, maybe.
Mm.
And so yeah, this one's in all American oak. So it's first of all STR barrels. So they've been shaved, toasted, recharred. We do that ourselves at the distillery, and then finished in ex-bourbon barrels. So basically these first two, Moss and then Seris 1, they essentially start off the same. So both lightly peated. They started in American oak STR, shaved, toasted, recharred. And then the Moss is finished in ex-bourbon. The Seris 1 is finished in sherry casks. We'll get onto that in a bit when we get onto the Seris. But yeah, essentially a gateway to peat. So this is our lightly peated series.
So Mark did mention, we were talking before when we started, these will be released next week. Mark, is that correct?
Mark,
you there?
can you hear us?
I'm here. Sorry. Sorry, my internet was a bit down.
That's okay. I just mentioned to the boys and girls that the mask will be released next week on the website, Waiheke website.
Yeah. And the idea being that if you've bought a tasting pack from Ash, and you and I don't have your email address, so what we're doing is we're offering out, and Ash will put a note afterwards, but anyone who bought the tasting pack goes into the first ballot to buy some moss, if you want to buy some moss. So we're gonna email out everybody first, to let them know before it goes live on the website. So you'll be getting an email next week, and then it will go live about 5 days later, just to give everybody an opportunity that bought a tasting pack to reward them if they want to, because Moss and Seris 1 will be the same. Both of those will come out within a week of each other, and you'll get the opportunity to buy one first. So if you want to.
So just to clarify, we'll find a way to get the emails to Colin, so you guys don't miss out. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you.
What's your thoughts on the Moss, Mark? And maybe because you and I spent 3 hours on Zoom that night, and my wife grabbed me at about midnight, and we talked a lot about, you know, what the future holds and this and that. Do you want to just talk us through what your thought process is? I remember you using the words quite a few times. You want to make it accessible. You want to have it at a certain price where people can buy the second bottle.
Yeah. So and let me know. Type me a chat. Sorry, I'm in this internet. I'm in a ski chalet in Methven with my daughter. We're learning to become ski instructors. We're doing it. Well, I'm not, but she is. I'm here as backup. So I'm sorry if my internet's not great. I'm really proud of this whiskey, and I guess the thing that we want to do is make whiskey that we want to drink. This whiskey is really the idea. It's our gateway to New Zealand peat. It's hopefully an accessible whiskey, both in price point and in taste and flavor, that gives people something that's just different, really. So are you guys still getting me, or have I gone?
We heard the whole thing. Yeah, don't worry. Yeah. And Colin, in terms of obviously the pack went out to your database.
You heard the whole thing. Great. Sorry. Yeah. So this was an early experiment in lightly peated malt. It's around about 15 ppm, and we messed around with taking American oak wine casks, shaving and retoasting them ourselves, knock the heads off, do a bit of coopering, spoke shave them down, grind them down, retoast them, and it sits in there for a while and then gets finished off in that bourbon, which gives you that creaminess in there as well. Yeah. It's a pretty easy dry finish, which I also enjoy as well. So I'm not a big sweet guy.
Yeah, when I hosted a tasting with this when we were down in Christchurch, start of this year, and I was talking about obviously the name is Moss, and I was saying, you know, it's got kind of mossy characters on the nose and on the palate, and there was this one guy that was just sitting a bit kind of in a bit of a daydream, a bit of a daze, and he said, "But how do you get that Irish moss character? How do you get Irish moss into it?" And I was saying it's just like moss in it, and it took a while actually for us both to realise what each other was talking about. But I hadn't heard of before this thing that you get from the pharmacies in New Zealand, Irish moss.
Yeah.
It's like throat lozenge or something.
Yeah.
And so it just shows how much like characteristics that people refer to. In case anyone that I've not met before hasn't guessed already, I'm Scottish. And so that's obviously where you grew up, the things you had in your childhood is kind of what you refer back to. So he was going on about this. How'd you get this Irish moss? And I had never had Irish moss, these throat lozenges from New Zealand pharmacies. So, but now I know what it is. I'm like, oh yeah, you do get that in there. So it's obviously quite aptly named in that way as well.
Because Colin, Mark said before, you guys will never release a whiskey under the age of 5, which I guess in a way saying this is 5 years or older. But for a whiskey that age, it's lingering for a very long time. It's not overpowering in any way, but the gentle smoke is there. And I know Mark says this quite a few times that, we don't want to compare or be like another whiskey, but in past when I've drank Taliskers, you get that, the peat smoke, the smoke doesn't overpower you, but it just sits there at the back of the palate beautifully. And that's the kind of feeling I'm getting with these. It's just there, it's reminding you it's there, but it's not overpowering at any point.
Yeah. And I'm sure probably most people or everyone on this call will be familiar with the concept that obviously ages quicker in New Zealand. Yeah. I think a lot of Indian distilleries have done a really good job of educating people about that and showing them that different climates age differently. I mean, as Mark mentioned, it's sometimes we've got angel share up to 15%. In Scotland, it's like 2 to 3% a year. So it is rapid aging, but with that as well, I think there's a fine balancing act of not sort of over influencing it with oak. So we've got to be quite careful in that respect as well. So I think 5 years is around about a good level when it's already got enough characteristics from the cask, but not too overpowered.
Yeah.
But we'll play around with it and see how we go. I remember Mark one time saying to me, actually, we'll probably never see a 30-year-old Waiheke whiskey because it would just be gone, basically. It'll evaporate.
But some vinegar.
Yeah, there'd be enough for one bottle.
If we get a nice big butt, and if we maybe get a third or fourth fill, then we can see what we can do. Age it somewhere nice and dark.
Yeah. And did Mark say before that 800 bottle release and that's it for Moss?
Yeah, 800 bottle batch release on Moss. So, I mean, this was an experiment, a snapshot in time when we were messing around. So what we've tended to do, because, this is all very, very new territory. And so we just don't know what barrels, how the peat's going to react, what barrel sequences we're going to use. And you'll see as we release these whiskies, we've got a hell of a lot of whiskies to release to you over the next sort of 2 or 3 years, and some crazy experiments, Viognier casks, Bordeaux casks. We've made our own port for Mudbrick, where we've then reused the port barrels. We've made cognac, reused the cognac barrels. So brandy. So we've been messing around with a lot, and hence we've got, probably 1,000 bottle releases of a bunch of different whiskies. There's at least 20 different whiskies there. But what we don't have is a consistent Waiheke whiskey. And that's a good and a bad thing. I think that, we don't have the Waiheke 12. One day we may do, particularly with our new distillery and as we're getting a lot more rigor into our manufacturing process. But right now, you just have to bear with us until we suss it out as to what it actually is we love, but we love peat. But this, hopefully, even if you're not a peat head, isn't going to switch you off too much. I mean, there's a lot of toffee in there, jasmine, licorice, fruit. There's a bit of lanolin, base notes, a bit of salinity, a bit of dryness. There's something for everybody, I think, in it. A little bit of sweetness, but it ends on a dry note, not too cloying, but it lingers. So yeah, we're pretty happy with it as our first release. It's dangerous, I think, releasing a peat. Ash will probably tell you, but I think around about 10%, 15% New Zealand whiskey drinkers are peat whiskey. Is that right, Ash?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that chat we had, yeah, it is very low. But I think maybe we need to come up with a different name for it in New Zealand. You know how, like, I feel like I need to bring my 2 kids in here, because like on YouTube, kids in New Zealand say certain things, something else, but in America, something else, just so it's more acceptable. So maybe we need a new term for peat, you know?
Well, as we'll see on the next one, like, you know, sherry in Australia is called apera. But I guess that peat, if we make the peat guys happy, that's good. We've got some very good non-peat. In fact, you know, our Dyad Chardonnay one, which is non-peated, picked up golds at both the Drammies and at the New Zealand Spirits Award. So I think that there's just so much stuff to do. I mean, there's so much stuff to do, so much cool stuff to do, that we don't have to copy anyone. We can just start doing this crazy stuff, release it to you guys. You'll tell us if you like it or not. And if you don't like it, well, you know, you don't buy it. And that's the idea of the tasting packs, really, is that each one of those, you know, the single casks are obviously single casks, so there's a lot less of that, but there's about 1,000 bottles per tranche of each batch that's getting released of each of these major whiskies. Yeah. So, interestingly, Moss, you know, if you come back to it now, if you had it open for a while, that sweetness really starts to develop, and the peat starts taking a real back seat. So that toffee, crisp, you know, that sort of, you've still got the cereal notes in there, but the sweetness is really coming through on the nose now, I think, anyway. I mean, I hate auto suggesting things to people during tastings, because, you know, it is what you think it is, but that's what I get out of it anyway.
And then just on the ABVs, like when we played around with this before we decided what to bottle it at, you know, I was pushing for, let's go for 46%. We've got to do 46%. It's the golden number. But we did actually try it. We tried it at cask strength, straight out the cask. We reduced it to 50, at 46 and 44. And actually 44 was where most flavor came through, and especially the peat. So if we're saying it's a peated whiskey, we want people to pour it in their glass and be able to taste peat straight away, not have to add the water, how many drops of water brings it from 46 to 44. But at 44, that was just where the peat sat just right. So I've just added a few more drops of water to it just now, and I think it does change it as well. And so that's, I guess, the beauty of it as well, is that people can play around with it. We also found that, or we decided that it was good to release some at lower ABVs, because I mean, probably everyone on this call that's on a call at 8:30 on a Sunday night drinking whiskey is quite into whiskey, but we like higher ABVs, I guess, generally most of us, whereas 90% of people that are buying whiskey in New Zealand probably don't, and so they're looking for something that's a lower ABV. So that's why we've got some, like in the next tasting pack, the Sweetwater. That's, what's that again, Mark? Is that
41?
41. 41. So that's our lowest ABV, eh?
Yeah.
But then we've got other ones that are up around 46 and 48, and then we want people like yourselves to then tell us, you've got to release this at cask strength, you've got to do this at 50%, and so then we'll do special ones like that as well. So I think that's where there's a lot of fun to be had in it, and we can do special stuff, and we can do higher strength stuff. So if you want more ABV, just let us know.
I love Kara's boiling pippy. Fantastic. I haven't met you, Kara, but I like you already. No idea what jasmine smells like. Super cream and honey, though, with a slight hint of boiling pippy. That's that salinity on the back end. You know, we're only 100 meters from the sea. Plus, we use rainwater off the roof that's blown in. So, you know, diluting it down. So, so Dave Hallett says, what water are you diluting it with? We're diluting it with rainwater. It's put through some filters and bits and bobs, but for the big bottles it's RO water, but you know, there's a lot of salt and a lot of black mold and a lot of fungus on a lot of these casks, and they get a lot of air in them very quickly. So I think you really taste the salinity throughout these whole things, which is the boiling pippy. Probably not a good marketing one, that one.
No, so
I open it up to the chat. Does anyone got any questions they want to flick through to me about the moss in particular? Or if you want to stick your microphone on and ask me a question, go ahead now.
I've got one question mark, but it's not about the moss.
Okay,
Just obviously what you
question,
mentioned. You mentioned obviously a lot of different varieties of and styles of whiskey coming out there, like port and brandy and a few of the wine casks. So if I think as sort of whiskey fans, you tend to hook into a distillery for a style, and they may have other stuff outside of that core style. What's going to be the hook for Waiheke whiskey? What's going to be the thing? Is it the peat? That's going to be the unique identifier that's going to keep us coming back. What's going to be the Waiheke style?
Well, I think the Waiheke style, we're just a bunch of geeks, and I'm not so sure Waiheke has a style yet. It's been 12 years and we're still making and discovering barrels of whiskey. We pulled out a barrel the other day, which we've decided is going to be our Christmas release, that's been sitting out the back there. And, and we haven't tasted it for a while. And it's like, wow. So I think that, we're a quality distillery, I would hope. And we're putting our heart and soul into it, but we're not a big manufacturer. And until we get to our new distillery where we can actually make a lot of, and so at the moment we make about 1 to 2 barrels a week, right, of whiskey. And with the new distillery, we've got the ability to make up to 4 barrels a day. So there is a really big difference in that amount of production. And when you're making that level of production, then we can really concentrate on honing in on exactly what it is and what it is we make. I think at the moment, what we're trying to do is take you on our journey with us, and get you as excited about it all as we are. And these whiskies that, when the moss is gone, it's gone. There won't be any more moss again. And if you like it, and buy a couple. And we've just been on this sort of, experimental journey, I guess, trying to find out what we like. But what Waiheke whiskey seems to be is, and all of them, that when you taste these, and when you come up, so a few people have been coming up to the bar, the Heki, and I've got a lot of other stuff there behind the bar that I whip out. They're all relatively dry finish. They've all got a bit of saline in there. They've all got a funky umami kind of note to them, which is something quite different. And I think it's a combination of where we are, distilling so close to the sea, and using rainwater, which is a bit unusual. And I think those things give us that sort of dry finish and that salinity that is really a hallmark of our whiskey. And as you go through these, you'll notice that. But it's a great question, David, and I can't answer it because I don't think we know yet what we are.
I can have a pop at answering it. I would say I think that maybe not so much as a style, like one particular style, like we're not going to be like all sherry casks like Tamdhu, or lightly peated like Highland Park, or sort of one kind of box, I guess. But there's going to be a distillery character, which I think comes through, which is, as Mark says, the salinity and the bit of funkiness. So I think the distillery character is going to link everything together. It's in the DNA. But I think if you could say there is a thing that epitomizes Waiheke whiskey, it's maybe that fact that there's variety and that it's open to innovation. So these are all going to be batches as well. So this is Moss batch 1. When this comes out in a 700ml bottle, it will say batch 1 on it. There will be another Moss as another point, and it might be a bit different, and then like any batch variation. So I think there's going to be that distillery character that will continue through them, but it's going to evolve over time as well. So it's going to be a journey that we go on. And so I think I don't envisage there being any sort of one. We're not just going to be Waiheke whiskey that does peated sherry whiskies. It'll be Waiheke whiskey that does a range of things, and maybe there'll be one that's a bestseller that might determine it. But I don't think it's going to be boxed in as much as that. Like as much as Tamdhu, Dave. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I do drink other whiskey. Right?
Do you? Just to add on, when I first spoke to Mark, that's one of the things that really got my attention is the sheer variety of different barrels they've been aging to and will continue to age in. And I like what Colin is saying, there will be another Moss, but it'll be a marriage of a different set of 5 to 10 barrels, hypothetically, and it will result in a different type of whiskey, and it might be a different ABV. And this is why I'm so excited, and I wanted to do this, is to learn more and obviously get other people to hear these stories, because I guess that is the style of Waiheke whiskey. It will be different. I don't know how long you guys can keep it up for and actually make $1 out of it.
Yeah, and that'll be down to the skill of our blender or blenders as well, is trying to recreate something similar to or close to the first moss. And then, like, I mean, as we know, whiskey changes over time. Lagavulin 16 from 20 years ago is not the same as Lagavulin 16 from today. So
yes, 100%. Well, you can't get Lagavulin 16, unfortunately, in this country.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
should we move on to Seris 1?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yep. Just finish, because I've already nearly drank my sample. That's why.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
So Seris 1, if you do still have any of the moss, you can compare back with the nose. And so the difference again between the two basically is the finish in sherry casks. We talk about it being sherry just because that's the easy lingo for people to understand, but it's apera, and so apera is Australian sherry. So Australia went through a bit of a soul searching thing a number of years ago when they were making sherry, but then decided they shouldn't call it sherry anymore because sherry's from Jerez in Spain. And so they said, okay, we'll call it apera. So they just chose this word, which is kind of based off of, I think, aperitif, like drink before a meal, but it's kind of the word that they just came up with for Australian sherry. So APERA. So yeah, so it's got that sherry note. It's got the bit of dried fruit on it. I've actually lost the tasting notes that we had for it, but whatever we've got on there, that's what it's got. No, it's got I think definitely the kind of raisin note comes through. Tiny hint of smoke. Maybe you get a bit less smoke on this just because the sherry dominates a bit more.
So this is the lightly peated compared to the, well, it's not as heavy, it's not heavily peated.
Yeah, so same peating level as moss. So about 15 ppms. And I think with that, the sherry, you've got a good mouthfeel. It's got like nice creaminess on it.
That orange, that's quite nice. I like that. Yeah, it's subtle, it's
glazed orange peel.
Candied orange peel.
Definitely candied orange peel kind of. But then at the end, it's got sandalwoody kind of flavors to me. It's kind of got that it kind of goes a bit bitter, I guess, like a little bit like if you've eaten a walnut with the skin on, you kind of get that nice dry, doesn't cloy, it kind of, it doesn't seem to last quite as long on the finish as the moss, which is really interesting, with the barrels. I mean, what we were trying to do with this was an exact, I mean, because I'm associate, I'm a sort of, so I guess medicine, one of those things, we kind of teach and the scientific principles. So we just said, well, let's take moss and these barrels of moss. We've got all these barrels of moss. Let's finish one lot in Jack Daniel's Festival bourbons, and then let's finish another one in PX sherry and see what happens, which is exactly what you're drinking now. You've got the experiment of the two pretty similar whiskies, despite the fact they've got slightly different fermentation lengths, but then they're relatively similar. And this is the end of that sort of experimentation phase, really. The name Seris is not a spelling mistake. Again, if you've got 5 minutes, go on, jump and have a read of the on the news about King Roger of the Norman King of Sicily in 1138. He commissioned a thing called the Tabula Rogeriana, which was the largest known map of the world. It was made by a guy called Muhammad al-Hadrisi. He's Arabic. And it was a bit like a doomsday book, 70 maps put together. It calculated the circumference of the earth to within 10%, hinted at gravity. Not only that, though, it stored place names and a snapshot of time of what people were doing at the time. And there was the sherry wars that Colin hinted at, a bit like champagne. The Spanish wanted to sort of stop people using the word sherry, and particularly other people manufacturing sweet wine. There was a lot of argument that the word was an English derivation, and therefore, Australians and other people could use it. The Spaniards argued that it came from Jerez don Fontana, which is where the region where sherry is made. But the map of Al-Adrisi showed that it actually was derived from Seris, which is the Arabic word for that town. And all the other words, like the English word sherry, came from Seris, just an English misspelling. Jerez came from, initially spelled with an X then a J, also came from Seris. And so they're able to show that in fact that the English didn't invent the name sherry, and that it was actually an Arabic word from way back when. And so we sort of, and this obviously that was an extraordinary thing. And that's, so the Seris range is our sherry range. So Seris 1 is our first release, PX. We've got Muscat, Oloroso, Fino. We've got a whole bunch of different sherry barrels with different types of whiskey in, which will be Seris 1, Seris 2, Seris 3 that will release as we go.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so although it's Australian Apera, it is still PX grape, so it's still Pedro Jimenez, the exact same grape that's used for Pedro Jimenez sherry from Spain, and so of course less air miles on the barrels as well. So sustainability is a very, very big word in whiskey just now, but as much as we can, we want to lessen that impact, and so instead of shipping butts from Spain, shipping them over the ditch is a lot less impactful, and we think we've got some quality casks there as well.
I like that a lot, actually. I really, really like that. If we got something again that makes you stand out a bit, why clog up those ships? They're running so slow and full at the moment anyway. Exactly. This stuff, and it's turned up so good. If it wasn't a good experience, you would go, nah, get some sherry butts from Europe. But it's turned out really, really good.
We almost oversherried it. We dropped the ABV. It was really sweet. I mean, the cask strength of this is sweet. It's amazing what the water does. So we have to be a little bit careful. A lot of the sherry butts coming in from Spain, it's almost impossible for someone like us to get a sherry cask from Spain. I mean, just almost impossible. And they're going to go, there's waiting lists years long. And even if you wanted to import barrels from Spain, it seems crazy to us when we can get great quality barrels from Australia just around the corner. We just can't. And all the good quality ones are snapped up, and a lot of you're talking, $1,500, $2,000 for a sherry butt out of Spain. It's all dried up, and God knows what the provenance of it is. Whereas these lovely, when you come to the distillery, you can have a look at the barrels, but they're actually beautiful. Made by AP John over there, and just superb quality. And that's what we find with the wine barrels as well. They're so under extracted, they're so hardly used that really all it takes is an angle grinder or a spoke shave to take off that 1 or 2 mil, and then you're back to new wood, rechar it again. They're like brand new barrels, essentially, high quality, which is great.
Why is there not a video of you doing this cooperage work? Just in a singlet, just burning a big fire. There are a couple of videos, but I think occupational health and safety aside, a lot of stuff we do, I guess we're having fun with these things, we're slowly releasing our secrets. There will be a blog post on our wood and how we reuse all our wood. What I'm trying to do is put all this stuff into the blogs on the news section. So everything about I'm sorry, I'll drop the bomb now. We have a screw cap, people. Everything we try and do is sustainable. So we've got the lightest bottle on the market. It's a 450 gram bottle, which is almost impossible to make. It's 60% recycled glass. You can't go any more quantity than that without it risking shattering. And
we went screw cap for lots and lots of reasons. You know, gluing bits of plastic onto bits of cork from Portugal, then shipping them in, to China or wherever, and then shipping them to New Zealand to have dubious quality cork. Again, we're a small purchaser. We can't buy minimum quantities of 1 million corks. And so most of the boutique distillers in New Zealand, those corks, you know, they're not great quality. And we want our liquid to be good quality. We want the bottles to be reusable. So once the distillery is open, there's a reusability program. You bring your bottle back, we'll exchange it for another one and give you a discount. You can reuse it with a screw cap. Also in New Zealand, I mean, we innovate with screw caps. They're made of recycled PTFE and you can reuse them and they don't get broken and they don't get chucked away.
Yeah.
What's in that bottle, Colin?
This one's Moss.
Oh, okay.
So these are the actual bottles, not with the label, but so there's on the top it's got the,
yeah, you can just see the here.
Established 2010. And it's actually, it gives a nice kind of reassuring feel actually to have a screw cap. Like you don't worry about knocking that off. Like you can, I don't know why you would want to, but you can play around with it as much as you want. Throw it over your shoulder, but it's just such a secure fitting. And then yeah, the bottle on the bottom, if you can see that, it's on here with the Waiheke Island Distillery, and around the bottom, Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Nice.
And then you want to talk about this as well, Mark, on the base?
Yeah. So
can I have a guess? No, you can carry on, please. Carry
on. Yeah. So there's our spirit still, our new spirit still, and both our old stills are geodesic. And again, if you get 5 minutes and have a read, we're all about copper contact and trying to maximize that surface area to volume ratio. And my business partner, you know, the guy that designed the stills, Eric, he's got a small shareholding in the distillery. He's a mathematician and an uber brain. And he was like, well, why are they that shape? You know, everything he boils down to, why is that? Why he's like a 10-year-old. Why is this? Why is it that? Why is that like that? Why are stills that shape? Maximum copper content. But why are they round? Because a sphere's got the smallest surface area to volume ratio of any shape. He's like, they want to be square. And I said, well, they're going to work if they're square. And he says, well, they want to be triangles then, pyramids. But, you know, pyramids probably, you know. So we evolved over time, and he did this CAD work to try and suss out these shapes to get these triangles into the stills to try and give us flat sides for reflux and big, large areas of surface area to volume ratio for any given quantity of liquid. And there's some interesting stuff going on in those stills. And so marry that with quite long distillation runs, you know, 12-hour plus spirit runs in these things. We're getting really, really big copper contact. And yeah, I mean, for a 5-year-old whiskey, you know, a lot of people have described them as quite ethereal. You know, they've got good mouthfeel, but they're not hot. You know, we take a lot of pride in getting those spirit runs right. So hence the bottle's got a geodesic shape in the bottom of it. The top is the neck of our wash still, which is quite wide, like a Lagavulin onion or tadpole still. And our spirit stills have geodesic shoulders, much more delicate, tapered beasts for getting those nice sort of delicate flavors out of the spirit run.
Nice. Cool. So before we
what do we think of the Seris one, Ash? What do you think of it? You've drunk it, or
send me more.
Have you had that before, Ash?
Yeah, I've got a problem. I'll come see you in the morning, Colin.
Anybody have any questions from the floor to ask about?
There's a couple of questions from David, actually. Can you see them, Mark?
Oh, yes. Sorry, beg your pardon. If a screw cap is good enough for Kim Crawford, it's good enough for Waiheke. Exactly.
Yeah.
We're Kiwis, right? We invented the screw cap. In fact, the guy who designed our bottle, Stefan Jelicic, Chandler bottlers, they're the only independent bottlers. He was the guy who essentially in wine brought screw caps into the industry with people like Kim and Alan Scott and people like that. So he popularized that and used to have a shop in Henderson that made them.
There was a question mark about the wood from Australia. Is it Quercus alba? Is it American oak, or is it
It is American oak, yes. Yeah, it is Quercus alba, yeah. Yes, it is. Dave, what else? How well does the vapor flow up the geodesic sides? It flows up well, but you get reflux. So it tends to boil around a lot longer, and you get a much longer spirit run out of it. And we think it's what gives us that our particular profile is that shape and that copper contact. So like the Glenlivet stills with their very narrow neck taper and trying to increase that. Anything you can do to keep that vapor in contact with the copper longer is going to help pull out those sulfurous compounds out of there, which is, at the end of the day, it's fascinating. I mean, I don't know if you've ever emptied a spirit still. It stinks. I mean, it just smells awful. It smells like rotten farts and hydrogen sulfide. There's bits of copper sulfate coming out. You think, oh my God. There's a lot of chemical reaction going on inside these things, especially, you've got 1,000 liters of whiskey inside. It's an interesting thing that goes on. Luckily, it's sterile when it comes out the other end. So, Cara, I feel like I need to apologize to all the math nerds I've picked up on after hearing about that still. Yeah, all good. So I want to keep it. Yeah, we're nerds, sorry. We're big nerds.
Nah, it's all good. It's all good. Should we move on to the Bog Monster?
Yeah. So Bog Monster is a single cask. So this is one that's going to be in the special circumstances. So special circumstances are SC. That's the more sort of high-end special range. These will come out in full-size bottles end of the year, Mark, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Around about there. Yeah. So
November time, yeah.
Month or two before Christmas. So Bog Monster, and then Cantankerous, that'll be in the next tasting pack. That's our Muscat single cask. Beautiful whiskey as well. But this is our most heavily peated, so hence the name Bog Monster. So
I was trying to remember, Mark, if this was my favorite out of the 6 samples you sent me. I'm pretty sure it was the Bog Monster. And
yeah,
I didn't know at the time it's a single cask.
Yeah, so this is a problem, making you everyone's favorite whiskey, and there's only one barrel of it. Yeah, so maybe we should, as David said, maybe we should have made like 500 barrels of this, and then we would have been sweet. But we know how we made it, and we can make some, and we've made a lot more since. It's just not old enough. So this is getting up there now. This is 7 years old, more coming towards 8 years old. This is the first Gladfield sort of peat that we got our hands on, experimentation wise, we chucked it, we supercharged it, chucked it in virgin oak. So this has been through virgin oak for a couple of years, really to crank this guy up, and then finished in bourbon and Jack Daniel's first of all bourbons. And it's an interesting whiskey because I think it hints at what New Zealand peat can be. It's still not the smoky beast that its name really says, but it was the reason we called it that was really just to try and get people to take notice of it, I guess. And Ricky, who's the beekeeper part of our crew, he came up with the name, and because it's bog peat. And back then we were actually going to bottle it at cask strength, hence the monster. But we've had quite a few people taste it at cask strength, and so 46% was it really for this, and that's where it sat really nicely. And so this is where we ended up with the Bog Monster.
Yeah,
Colin,
there's a few notes, a few tasting notes coming up in the chat. So Tim said Creamy Werther's Originals. So yeah, I get that note. That's a beautiful childhood memory note. Dave, coal and tar soap, but probably only Colin knows what that is.
I know what it is.
I'm racking my brain actually, Dave, to remember what that is. I know what coal is. Tar soap is that?
Coal tar, yeah. It's what they used to make it like it's like a sort of a soap that's a medicated soap. It's good for dandruff.
Yeah, it's probably actually, yeah. Now it's actually taking me back to my primary school toilets. It
was like a yellow bar of soap, but it had a really
big chunk, big brick yellow bar.
That's the one.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And I think
See if I can find it.
eucalyptus, you know, that camphory sort of smell, I get, and bit of lanolin.
It's got a beautiful nose.
Any idea on if and don't say if you don't want to, what sort of retail would that might be, the single cask?
Yeah, that was.
Don't say if you don't.
No, it's going to be, well, it has to be around probably the $200 mark, because there just is only going to be 300 bottles of it, and it's won gold in every single competition we've ever put it in. So yeah, and yeah, I guess that the question is, would people pay? I mean, it's still cheaper than a Cadrona, for example, but it's a 7-year-old whiskey, and yeah,
700 ml bottle, yes.
200, yeah, 700 mils, yeah.
That's just a clap from me for doing 700s.
They're all 700s, yeah. No, so look, nothing under 5 years, and pretty much everything is 6. So Seris is 6, everything else is 7, and all 700 ml bottles. I mean, 200 is the limit for us. Well, we'll see where the market goes and what our retail is. 180, 200, something like that, because they are single cask releases, and we think it's got something to say. And to be honest, we need the money. I mean, everything. I mean, we just got an email today from Gladfields. The peat's gone up again. When we started, we were paying around about $1,400 a ton for peated barley from Gladfield. Now it's about 2,800. So the price for a ton of barley has just gone through the roof. Electricity, barrels. My first lot of first fill bourbons for around about $300 each. Now they're approaching $600 each. They've doubled. So the costs are good, and the price, and of course excise has going up next week. So we have some of the highest excise rates in the world now. It's about $59.
How much of a part you being in a not very accessible place is playing in this? But you're literally on an island. It's not a short swim.
I think there's plus and minuses for us. I mean, for retail, from a retail point of view, Waiheke. So the best way for us to stay alive is, and you're not going to like this, Ash, but we'll look. We're also going to distribute through a relatively small group of distributors, because we're heavily focused down the geek end of whiskey. But the best thing we can do is sell some of our whiskey through our cellar door, because we've got to make some money somehow. And Waiheke is great for that, because we get a million new year. So I think that we've chosen, we're heating our steam boilers are electric fired, and we're trying to do everything we can to offset prices of stuff, and because we don't want to burn diesel, and we can't get natural gas, so electricity is it for us, and we've got a recycling program We've got some biomass boilers that we've designed to have built. We can't get them through council at the moment, but the idea is that we can preheat, burn our spent grain, preheat with that, solar top up, and then we've done a deal with Prime Energy for, so we're 100% renewable purchase. It's a little bit more expensive per kilowatt hour, but it's all geothermal and hydro. So, I mean, all the things that we can do, we're trying to, because I guess the cost of doing business with whiskey is we just accept a lower profit margin, but we try and recoup a little bit more of the cost, I guess, from making it by trying to sell some of it ourselves online, and then through through select distributors, essentially. Whether or not we'll export our whiskey overseas, I don't know. It depends a lot on. The world's a changing place, and shipping liquid around the world is, it's just. We've got 5 kids and 3 grandkids, and we've got to think about all those things. We take it all into consideration. So, the price of doing business in Waiheke is shipping stuff. Luckily, we have a business partner. For those of you who don't know, we've launched the distilleries. We have a 16-acre site with a bar and restaurant already open. We have a microbrewery. and the bar and restaurant is owned by my business partner in the whole thing's called the Waiheke. So it's a and they own a food distribution business, so they're bringing stuff over pallets over the whole time, so we just chuck some peat on there and bring it over 10 ton at a time, silo it, and away we go.
In terms of Salvador, Mark, the chat you and I had, that was many months ago, I 100% support it, and I think it's a really good idea. I think I gave you an example of 4 Pillars and Starwood, both in and around Melbourne, and I fully fell in love with the brands because I could go to the distillery, have the amazing people talk to me, but at the end of it all, if you buy a bottle, where a lot of the Scottish whiskey distilleries I've been to, and then in particular Japan, you couldn't buy their own product at the distillery, because obviously they got problems with the hoarding and all that kind of stuff. So, we're all looking forward to coming to Waiheke and
yeah, thanks. I mean, we have a whiskey bar. We're opening our own bar, a tasting room, and then the idea is to. A lot of people have asked about casks. Our cask release program is going to be slightly different. We're not interested in investors. We're not in the business to sell casks of whiskey for other people to make money off it. It's not what we won't sell whiskey so people drink it, really. So we're hoping that that people will come along and make the whiskey with us. So and that may be staying on the island for 2 or 3 days and getting involved, mashing in, making your barrel, and really physically being part of it. And us being very select about who we sell barrels to, clubs, associations like yourselves, people who really genuinely want to buy the whiskey, who aren't just trying to buy it, get it worth more money and then flick it on. So I do understand that mentality, and that's very important, I'm sure, a part of whiskey, but that's probably not what we're about. But certainly hopefully you guys will come to the island and get involved. And that's really what we want. It's a community. The number one thing we're trying to do is make New Zealand whiskey a thing, and try and make good quality spirit that people say, well, actually New Zealand whiskey is a thing. What do we think of Bog Monster?
Well, if anyone wants to donate the sample to me, I'm taking donations. Happy to take anyone's Bog Monster if you haven't polished it off already. Bloody delicious stuff, man. Really, really good.
Yeah.
Question here. Any hint of aldehydes in the Bog Monster? I'd hope not, but can you get anyone get any aldehydes in it? No. And then what size of barrel do you anticipate in using your barrel program? 200 liters. I mean, I think that the cask for us is, we have never used small barrels ever. So we don't, none of these whiskies have been aged in anything other than full size barrels. We haven't gone down the mini barrel route.
Just so you know, Mark, I've had 5 people messenger me just now. We should do an 8 p.m. field trip. So I guess we'll
come over.
We'll come see you soon. Yeah.
Come over to the island and hang out, and
yeah. And Mark, tell us about I was thinking when Ash was mentioning about how logistically difficult it is being on an island in the middle of Hauraki Gulf. What's the plans for the stills arriving?
So jump on the website and have a look again in the blogs at our new stills that have been made by Speyside Copperworks. They arrive on the 27th of June, and they're coming over typical Waiheke style. So we're getting them shipped to a farm in Clevedon, and then they're being barged. We borrowed a barge off a mate. He usually brings cows and stuff over on it. And so we've got 2 barge trips planned because we've got 6 new washbacks, which are 2,800 liters each. Our spirit receivers, they're coming over on a barge, and then the stills arrive. So they're here in 3 weeks, and then the stills arrive at the end of July, and they're coming over on the barge, and then we high-ab those over. So they're 7 meters tall. They're quite big beasts. So they're 3,000 liter wash, 2,800 liter spirit. So we've sort of upped our game a bit as far as production size, 2-to-1 ratio. So we do 2 washes to 1 spirit run. So we're hoping to get around about 600 Ola out of a spirit run. You know, we may be filling 3 casks. So 2 washes to 1 spirit, but we'll let you know how it works. Commissioning, we're hoping to start on the new distillery commissioning around about, I'm going to say October, November, but don't hold me to that. And then once that's all up and running in the new year, hopefully we can get you guys all over to have a special 8 p.m. day at the distillery.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm
Helicopter charter from Huntley.
Yeah. They don't. Nah, it's so good. But I know it's been really good. I think for me, the Seris has been. I know in the past I said Bog Monster, but for me tonight, Seris, it's just different. It's obviously it's not the same sherry sweetness and the spice we expect, you know, from a Scotch whiskey or an Irish whiskey. It is different. Can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's that orange character that I was getting. I don't know if others agree. Maybe in the chat, if you guys want to maybe obviously leave the New Make spirit out of it, but what your 1, 2, 3 might be. It'd be good for Colin and Mark as well. Tim's already said he's not.
Seris is our #1 seller at the bar. So at the moment we have Seris, Sweetwater, Moss at the bar. Those 3. As well as we make bourbon. Well, it's not bourbon, obviously, because we make American style whiskey, which we only sell in the bar, and that won't be going retail. We also make a honey bourbon style whiskey, which is again won't be going anywhere near retail. But and interestingly enough, you know, people coming through the bar, the honey bourbon is a big, but that's mostly 18-year-olds smashing it. Or in highballs. But if we look at the single malts, then Seris outstrips 2 to 1 everything else. I just think the accessibility of the sherry and just that interesting fruity sort of whiskey, it seems to be that everyone seems to like. So yeah. And
do you have ongoing reasonable access to these Afro cask out of Australia? It's like ongoing thing.
And the JDs and we've got a very good barrel replenishment program. So we've got 4 containers of JD casks arriving this year, which should last us probably the year, maybe a year and a half. And then, I mean, we're trying to. The problem is it's a balancing act between storing. The problem with storing casks is you see them sitting outside, you know, cooperages, and thousands in Scotland, but they've got to be recoopered. And you know, trying to get whiskey barrels recoopered in New Zealand is a very expensive thing to do. So we try to bring our barrels over as wet as possible, and so then we just really steam them to tighten them up, bang down the hoops and fill them. So we don't want to we're trying to keep our barrels in, you know, keep our wood relatively quick turnover. The American barrels are a piece of cake. Australian barrels are a piece of cake. They come over and they make some great wood barrels. So AP John is who we buy those off. We buy the first fills direct, the Jack Daniel's first fills. The wine pretty much we get given them. And the wine barrels we're either doing with a dyad, we're doing what's called a wet fill. So literally just rinse it out, because most of the Chardonnay, for example, is fermented on the lees. So it's full of crap. So we just wash those barrels out with a rotating barrel washer, and then the whiskey goes straight in. So dyad's been 6 years on the wood and then 1 year on a wet fill Chardonnay, for example, or the Viognier. So we're using those wine barrels pretty much raw. They've had wine in them. They take the wine out and put the whiskey straight in. Yeah, so that makes for some really interesting finishes.
Really, really good. In terms of the next pack, when could people see that out? Is there like a timeline around that? The next tasting pack?
So next pack, we're looking at end August, mid to end August for dog ears. So dog ears is our non-peated pack. Then November, we're looking at special circumstances, and then obviously Christmas release, which will be a limited edition Christmas release with a little special gift and a bit of fun. So yeah, hopefully we'll just keep the packs coming.
And so off the back of each pack, there's 2 bottles released. So off the back of this one is Moss and Seris 1. Off the back of Dog Gears is the Sweetwater and
Dyad. Yeah.
And then off the back of Special Circumstances is Bog Monster. So you got to wait a bit longer now until your next Bog Monster. But Bog Monster and Cantankerous.
Yeah. The bog, I'd say one thing about bog, just leave it out for 5 minutes and let it sit there for a little bit while and then come back to it. It's one of those whiskies that really just, also once you've taken the top off it, it's it's an acquired, it just takes a while for it to mellow out. These little miniatures, quite interesting miniatures, releasing miniatures, you get bottle shock, they travel, they're transported, they're shaken around. But they're pretty good representations of what we got. But if you want to come and taste it from the cask, all you got to do is ask. Come and see us.
Yeah. But I also just want to say, the purpose of this tonight was 100% just to learn something from Colin and Mark firsthand. The samples packs, you guys already sold them. Some 8 p.m. customers were asking for them. And then some were like, we already have them. Can we still come in? It's like, come in. Then they're like, we can't come. My child is doing this and that. I was like, don't worry, we'll record it. And, you guys can hear the stories. Because it's the stories that sell the whiskey. I've learned that. And the reason why I took that trip to Scotland and Ireland, is it's the stories that get people in, and the story of Waiheke whiskey is just so amazing. Especially with, it's kind of like it was a bit of a mystery. Now we know a little bit. And now all this cool stuff's coming from Scotland. It's just like, oh my God, this is like in terms of a graph, it's like a solid lean up. It's amazing. Yeah.
Thank you. And the last thing is, is on the bottom of our bottle and on the inside of your packs. If you pull out the inside of the pack, see this. And a lot of people ask us about this. This is vitriol. It's Latin for the alchemical phrase for the search for the philosopher's stone. By visiting the interior of the earth and rectifying, you'll find the hidden gem or the hidden stone. And the Hermetic philosophy, so it was Newton before he discovered gravity, was very involved in the search for the philosopher's stone. And the concept around vitriol is a double thing, which is really a constant look within yourself to try and make the best thing you can. For Waiheke whiskey, we're trying to make our own gold, I guess, our own hidden stone. But this motto for us, it's one of those things that the idea of vitriol, of finding a gem where you weren't looking for it. That's kind of what we're trying to create. We're trying to create some joy and not be a mass-produced brand, and also bring you guys along the journey. And that's why we're a very personal brand. And so that's why this stuff's so important to us, and we'll keep doing it. And that's why if any of you turn up and want to come and taste out of barrels and hear the stories, then that's what we're here for. And you've just got to let us know. Come to the Heki, come and see me. I'm there every weekend and hang out, and we'll taste some whiskey.
Yeah, I think that's what's really important as well. Is it sounds cheesy, but it's not just about the product; it's about the people in the place as well. So this is whiskey from Waiheke, and it's made by people on Waiheke, and it's about the place. So you really got to come and visit to fully understand it.
Yeah. Just a couple of things for me. Colin, did you say we'll get allocated some bottles at some stage? Maybe.
Yeah. So it is limited numbers, but
yeah,
as we talked about earlier, anyone that's bought. So if you've bought the pack via waihekewhiskey.com, we've got your email address already. You'll be in with a chance, first chance to buy, first refusal on the Moss and Seris 1 700 mils. If you bought it through Ash, then we'll sort that out, and you've got the chance still to buy if you bought it directly from Ash.
And the second question is for Mark. Does that offer to do something together still stand? Do a collaboration? We'll just
I mean, I think that there's a barrel there somewhere for everyone, really. We've been making a lot of whiskey. But it's all about coming up and trying something, and then we'll do. But it's meaningful for a good cause, or for whatever. We're always keen to get out there, and it's my primum non nocere, right, which is our motto, which is first do no harm. So you kind of our Hippocratic oath is all about helping people. I've had a few people comment about how come a doctor's making whiskey which is supposedly not good for you, but I disagree. The aquavita, the water of life, is definitely good for you. And it's been very good for me as spending my life with cancer and destruction and death, to be surrounded by super lovely people involved with whiskey. And it's just a really rewarding thing to be involved in. And that's really why we're doing it. It's just good fun. Well,
I mean, you told me when we spoke at the Angel Spirits Awards, you spent time in India as well. The Indian doctors recommend whiskey. They always do. That's why it's consumed quite heavily, but they say a couple of drams a night, not a half bottle or full
don't
bottle.
hit the bottle, but definitely a little bit. I think a little bit doesn't do you any harm.
Everything in moderation, but I think it's definitely good for the mental health, and of course for socialization. That's the magic of sharing drinks together.
Absolutely. And I look forward to sharing them with all of you guys.